And for more insight, I'm now joined here in studio by Colonel in the Reserves, Olivier Rafowicz, Senior Security and Military Consultant. Mr. Rafowicz, before we talk about the Palestinian side, let's talk about this combined effort on behalf of the Israeli security forces. Several different units, again, several weeks of this effort that culminated today. What do we know?
Just like you have mentioned, it is a coordinated, very well prepared operation. According to what we know now, it's basically according to intelligence, very accurate and specific intelligence from the Shin Bet, from the Shabak. And the army, the special unit of the IDF, and the Yamam, which is the special unit from the police forces, together actually did what they did, and they successfully actually achieved the goal. The goal was to eliminate this very dangerous Palestinian terrorist group.
But I must ask, Mr. Rafowicz, how obviously a very impressive operation that was successful at last, but why did it take so long? We're talking about a cell of 4 members in a territory the Israeli security forces is believed to have strong intelligence. Still, it took quite some time.
It took time, but if you look at the details of the result of the operation, it was in the daytime, which is very rare actually. It was when nobody outside the terrorist group could have been, I would say, impacted or involved in the Israeli operation. So altogether, it's a very accurate intelligence and also the willingness to prevent, to avoid civilian casualty, what we call collateral damages.
Right. And I would like to read out some of the defense minister's statement now, Mr. Rafowicz. Benny Gantz saying, recently I have ordered an increase in counter-terrorism activities in the face of shooting attacks and increased presence in central roads and locations in the West Bank. We will continue our proactive activities, thwart attacks, and lay our hands on anyone who tries to harm human lives. Let's talk more about those preemptive measures that are being carried out on behalf of Israeli security forces. What can be done?
The number one issue is intelligence. And as you know, Eli, very well for a long time, intelligence here is shared with the Palestinian Authority, special intelligence apparatus within the Palestinian Authority in order to work together with the Israeli forces in order to prevent and to attack Hamas Islamic groups against the interests of both Israel and the Palestinian Authority. But in this case, if I may, we are facing something different and something new, and something I would say even very worrisome, because the 4 terrorists were part of a Fatah group and not of Hamas or Islamic Jihad group, which is actually a new phenomenon specifically here. We can also think or conclude that from this issue, it was very difficult, maybe even impossible, to share intelligence with the Palestinian Authority, because together they were from the same political, I would say, branch or political direction.
And speaking to that point, exactly, the Palestinian Foreign Ministry naturally released a very harsh condemnation, condemning in the strongest terms the brutal and heinous field execution committed by the occupation forces in the city of Nablus, again, and I'm quoting. But again, echoing what you've just said, Mr. Rafowicz, do you think it's to an extent lip service? Because we do know that the coordination between Israel and Ramallah is very tight in that sense. Hamas also alluding to a potential cooperation between the PA or the PA in Ramallah and security forces on the Israeli side. So what do you make of it?
It's a very interesting question, a very delicate issue. Intelligence is a key issue here between the Palestinian Authority and the State of Israel. We can assume that even if in this case, it was a Fatah, PLO actually, oriented terrorist group, we can imagine that even though there was a cooperation or coordination sometime between the Israeli authorities, intelligence authorities, and the PA. But it's very difficult for them to accept, and of course now they have the obligation, I would say, to express discontent and of course critics. But if I may, another point, the reaction in the streets are very tough, very rough, because we're talking about a pinpoint elimination operation. There was no real, I would say, fight with the terrorists. It was also the issue of it, to eliminate them before.
Surgical operation to an extent.
Before, right? Before they could have carried out another operation.
Right.
So for the public, for the people around, it looks a very tough operation. And now they talk about revenge, about reprisal. So we have to be ready, as usual, of the same declaration.
And this brings me to our last question in the time we have left. Islamic Jihad obviously vowing retaliation. Hamas already calling on Damascus to participate in the funerals. We understand that there are some clashes in nearby streets. Again, as the funerals begin, what should we expect?
We can expect some reaction, some even revival of terrorist operations, because in the last months, actually, the Shin Bet with the army have successfully disrupted and even prevented many operations from the terrorist side. It's possible that we can now be aware of something, a new wave. Hopefully, I hope not, but it's possible.
Yes, well, an ever volatile region. What can we say?
Correct.
Colonel in the Reserves, Olivier Rafowicz, Senior Security and Military Consultant. Thank you, as always, for helping us break it all down.